Well, we're about 1 minute from the start time. Thank you for joining us. Hello, and welcome to Celebrate Black History Month, part of the latinXfactor series. We're joined today with our partners from Prospanica and SHPE to bring you an in-depth conversation, a deep conversation, a truthful conversation, an authentic conversation about what it means to be Black in America, but also Black within the Hispanic community. I want to thank in particular the members from SHPE and from Prospanica that were able to join us today, as well as our two esteemed leaders, Raquel Tamez and Thomas Savino, who've been key in deepening the partnership between SHPE and Prospanica. We're continuously looking for greater ways to interact, to collaborate, to partner at each other's events, and in the virtual space is no different. So we're delighted to have three people that represent both organizations collectively. Today's latinXfactor is part of an ongoing series to sharpen you as attendees, so that you have a competitive edge in your career, so you can get ahead. This is the X factor that makes you the top pick for everything you want to go after. This is also part 1 of 3 of the Diversity and Inclusion series, and so we'll have information about the other 2 sessions later in the hour. First off, I'd like to just give a little bit of an introduction to Black History Month itself. We're now in the 95th anniversary of Black History Month. It wasn't actually a month when it started. It was actually a week. Started in 1926, an individual by the name of Carter Woodson decided to have what they called at the time Negro History Week. He arbitrarily chose the month and second week of February in particular because it coincided with 2 important figures for the Black community: the birth date of Abraham Lincoln and the birth date of Frederick Douglass. It wasn't until 1970 that they extended to a full month-long observance, and during our country's bicentennial in 1976, then President Ford decreed this is actually going to be a full month because Black history is American history, and as we were celebrating 200 years of our country, it was also important we recognize and celebrate the contributions of Blacks to that history and to our country as well. With that, I'd like to hand off and introduce our 3 panelists who are going to give you a little bit of their background, who they are, and tell you why they're here. First up, Teresa Hernandez.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for the lovely introduction. My name is Teresa Hernandez, and I was born and raised in the beautiful Bronx. Attended grammar school here in the Bronx, and then went on to college in the city at Marymount Manhattan College and pursued my MBA at Mercy. I am currently the administrator for quality, equity, and safety at NYU, one of many within the healthcare network at NYU. And as you can see by the slide, my career trajectory was in healthcare. And I am a proud 3rd generation Puerto Rican, and I am President Emeritus of Prospanica New York. I was president for 2020 and vice president in 2019, and I have helped lead the way to the chapter for winning Chapter of the Year 2 years in a row. I am also a fellow, graduated in October of 2020 with Leaders of Color, Education Reform Now, and they advocate for equal and equality education for Black and Brown students. And we help see leaders of color into elected official seats. I am also on the advisory board for the American Dream School. It's a charter school in the Bronx, and they develop academic excellence for 6th through 12th graders in both Spanish and English. And I am on the advisory board where we discuss, guide, and assist 12th graders on their path to college. I am also very passionate about the healthcare disparities that have inundated the Black and Latinx communities, especially during this pandemic.
Our second panel today is Lenin Paulino.
Good evening. Hello, my name is Lenin Paulino. I was also born in New York City, Washington Heights to be specific. I was, graduated from high school in 2004, and then I got to know this organization by the name of SHPE in 2005 when I was in college. And then I graduated with my master's in 2010 and moved to Virginia to pursue my full-time career as a patent examiner at the United States Patent and Trademark Office. I keep it simple. This has been my only career my entire life. And then in 2016, I got married, happily married. And then in 2018, my wife, she's a pastry chef. We decided to start a venture with the Bronx cakes. And then 2001, I'm still happy.
Cakes is a great way to stay happy. Thanks, Lenin. Our third panelist, bringing up the pack, Allyship.
Hello, good evening. Pleasure to be here. My name is Alex. I'm born and raised Puerto Rican. I'm an engineer, graduated from University of Puerto Rico, Mayagüez, then I got my master's from RPI in New York, and then I pursued my MBA in Puerto Rico as well, University of Turao. Out of all these, everything you see here, the most important thing you have to take away here is that I met my wife in 1996, which is when really things change. She introduced me to SHPE, and I've been a lifetime member since 1996. I've held several leadership positions in the Connecticut chapter, in the Puerto Rico chapter as president as well. So SHPE has been part of our lives since forever, for both me and my wife. I'm currently a consultant after many years working as a process improver for General Electric and then several pharmaceutical companies, but now I'm focused on process improvement for both the public and the private sector. And also both in the Puerto Rico and international markets. So it's been an interesting career, 20 years in various industries as well. Also, last but not least, important that one of my biggest satisfactions is contributing to universities through leading co-op programs, helping them grow, helping them become more confident about their careers. So it's been very fulfilling, a very fulfilling and important part of my life. And finally, the things I love in my life, just, I'm a musician, been singing for over 25 years. And then recently I became a very active runner. I have 2 marathons on my belt, and I'm enjoying every ounce of cardio that I put into it. So I look forward to sharing some of my stories with you.
I think after a year of pandemic, we could all use a little bit more cardio in our lives. My name is Will Davis. I'll be your moderator today. I'm a member of the SHPE National Board, serving as National Secretary. I also work full-time with NASA, Johnson Space Center in Houston, where I'm a Diversity and Inclusion Deputy Manager. And so I'm delighted to spend this time with you and to share the stage with Teresa, Lenin, and Alex. And so let's get into the questions. I do have a few reminders though. We are going to have a portion towards the end for audience Q&A, so please make use of the questions tab if you're an attendee. We'd love to hear from you and be able to respond to your questions either in advance or based upon our conversation. We will provide a LinkedIn information at the end in case you want to connect individually with folks. We're also recording this session, so it will be available through the YouTube channel for latinXfactor, and so you'll be able to refer back to information from this session. You'll also be able to share it on social media, so help us spread the word so more people can benefit from this conversation. With that, let's jump into the first question. And my first question is really something we're going to ask all 3 panelists to weigh in on, because I think it sets the foundation for exploring this topic of celebrating Black History Month. And we're going to start from identity, because that's what it's about. It's about identity. For each of you, what would you say are the characteristics of your identity to have primacy? What are those things that are just top tier, the most dominant part of who you are? They influence how you view the world. They likely influence how the world views you. And in particular, you specifically address how you identify when it comes to race and when it comes to color. And let's start it off with Lenin first.
So I like to identify myself as an Afro-Latino. Growing up, my mom is very white and my dad is very black, but I never saw it kind of like black and white. I always saw it brown, like my skin tone. But looking forward into my identity in self, looking back, I mean, I saw a lot of things that had happened to me or happened to me while growing up. As a Latino, my color, I was bullied, by other races, but also was, more or less helped by that same race in a way. But then I was also, if you were to go to a store, like I get this a lot, going into a store and like getting followed just because of the color of your skin and all that stuff has made me kind of like wary of what I am and how I should perceive myself and how I should go about my ways in around the world, right? So when I see myself, I always have identified myself like as a Dominican, right? Because I was born here, but deep down inside, I've always been like Dominicano, like so it hasn't been an easy road, but I know that other people has had tougher roads than I, but I could tell you that as an Afro-Latino, even in the workspace, sometimes you see how you're treated amongst yourself with other peers that are of different race. So there's a lot of things that I've seen in my short life.
Yeah, and I can share some of those perspectives. Teresa, what about you? Identity, race, and color.
For me, I identify as a Latina. I know I wasn't born in Puerto Rico and I'm considered third generation, but I'm Puerto Riqueña. And as far as like my color, I would say I have that caramel complexion that represents the perfect combination of Taino Indian, Spanish, a mix of African heritage, which is basically what encompasses the Puerto Rican culture. And, regardless of how we see ourselves, assumptions are always going to be made because of the way we look or possibly the way we speak. And quite recently, I had an assumption made about me at the gym. I work out very early in the morning at 4:45 a.m. And yeah, I'm crazy. I go that early. I maintain a pretty healthy life. And this gentleman noticed that I was going pretty like every day during the week. And he says to me, I just want to say you work out really hard. Kudos to you. And I said, oh, thank you so much for noticing. And he took a seat back and he was like, oh, you're not you don't sound the way I thought you would sound. And I said, well, what did you think I was going to sound like? And he says, oh, I don't know, maybe have an accent. And I was like, well, you should never make that assumption of someone because you know what they say about those who make assumptions. And I said, enjoy your workout. And I walked away. So there's always going to be that stigma of, do they speak a certain way? Do they act a certain way? And my name is 1000% Latina. Teresa Marie Hernandez. There's no escaping it. And I embrace my name. I embrace my heritage. And it happened to my father too. When someone said, oh, you don't look like a Hernandez. And my father was like, well, what is a Hernandez supposed to look like? Where is it supposed to be a specific color? Am I supposed to sound a certain way? And, you experience these things growing up and you experience it even more, in your career and your interactions, your day-to-day with people.
But occasionally I've been on the mess with people by saying my last name is Davis, not Davis.
Right.
And it always just causes a pause for a second. But that's the moment where you can teach something, right? I mean, you had a chance to either lash back at that unintentional microaggression from the individual in the gym, or to be graceful, and you chose grace. That takes a strong personality to do. Thank you for sharing that. Alex, same question. Privacy in your identity, race, color, etc.
Yeah, sure. You know, for in my case, being a Puerto Rican born and raised, our reality is a bit different. But I think there's certain elements that really drive that sense. I mean, if you ask me, I'm a Puerto Rican trigueño, right? It's a kind of like this tone that we all assume we have. We're all trigueños, we're all Puerto Ricans, and there's so many other classifications that we just can't fit in. That basically this is what simplifies it for us. But truth is, our identity, it's I can think of two things that are really at the core of our identity. One of them is the representation that we have externally around the world through our exponents, whether they're musicians, artists, engineers, who make us feel like we're part of a bigger world. They put us in the map, and it might sound small, but you know, their successes become our successes and give us identity. You know, things that it might sound even small, but things like worldwide events, sports, beauty pageants, those are things that really make us believe and understand who we are as Puerto Ricans. And another thing that brings a little bit of a essence to the way we identify ourselves is our relationship with the U.S. This is also something that we struggle as a country, and it creates a sense of dependency on some people, second-grade status, and even less capable than some of our counterparts in the U.S. And somehow this is rooted in how we view ourselves and how we view how we think that the world sees us. So it's these factors which are a little bit political, a little bit of our presence in the world in terms of arts and sport. In the end, all of that becomes part of who we are. So that has centered us into this concept of just Puerto Rico. And even when we go out and we live in different places, you know, we have, you know, more than half the population lives in the U.S. It's geared towards that. It's who we are as Puerto Ricans, which is like Teresa said, it's a mix. It's a very beautiful mix of Taino, of Blacks and European Spanish. So Puerto Rican trigueñito.
I heard brown, I heard caramel, I heard Puerto Rican, I had a lot of different words here. And it's not an easy question to answer, right? And it changes from person to person. You know, one of the things I teach in D&I training is diversity is actually not what makes us different from each other. It's actually what unites us. Because each of us is different, and if we're all different, then we're all the same as well. And most people don't think about that. They think about differences as difference, but difference is uniting. All those things that each of you bring to the table find unity under the Puerto Rican flag. And that's something that you carry in your heart. That makes you proud. But it's a tough thing to navigate. This idea of race, national origin, color, they all intersect, they all cross-connect, but they're all slightly different. It causes a lot of strife and conversation. And so, you know, they're not always one-to-one. And for some people, they struggle to see that. And so, you know, how does confusion on race and color impact you? How does it impact the Latino community? And when it goes to the negative, we now start talking about things like racism and colorism. And how are those similar, but then how are they also different? And so, Alex, you finished last, so let's start you first on this one.
Yeah, sure. You know, as I learned more about the concept of colorism itself, you know, I realized the reality of discrimination in Puerto Rico. It's more a matter of color than race, which makes it even more illogical. You know, locally, we're not probably as racially diverse as the mainland. You know, our mix is really more the result of years of colonialism and occupation. So really, our Black Puerto Ricans are really descendants, the same of this heritage, not so much of a influx of African immigrants like the US. It's more of really an outcome of the same mix. So what are we? It's interesting. 3/4 of our population, when you ask them in the census, they say they're white. So, but in reality, what are the categories? The categories is white, it's black, it's native, it's Pacific Islander. So where do you fit? And you know, the sad thing is that when you're given with really two choices, really that they are here, people tend to line in a way. They go away as far as possible from blackness, and that's a problem because it discredits the reality of our identity. Because we're not considered a race, we're considered more of a nationality, heritage. So it becomes a point of confusion, and that's why, as I said earlier, we end up all getting into the same concept. Just Puerto Rican, that's it. I don't know what you mean. So many Puerto Ricans don't see themselves as black because of the negative connotations that come with it. You know, the way we've been taught is that, especially in the Caribbean, black is ignorance, it's a servant, it's a slave. So then for some reason white sounds better. And even if you're dark and you marry someone who's lighter, I don't know if you've heard the saying that goes mejorando la raza, you're improving the race. So what does that tell you? So that's, you know, in the middle of confusion, to your point, and the options we're giving, we end up going into one spectrum that is not even aligned to our reality. And that to me, I've come to the realization that in the end, when we talk about racism, it's really rooted on colorism, because whether you are Puerto Rican, US, Mexican, Colombian, if your skin is dark, that puts you in the same category as everybody else. And the limitations in terms of opportunities, access to education, access to healthcare, and to opportunities are the same. So I think that the similarity is really more that one is the product of the other, from my perspective.
Yeah, and that's one of the most important parts of every individual's D&I journey, is that you're going to encounter people who don't always understand this, but sometimes it's hard for you to figure it out too, and you have to make sense of it for yourself, so at least you can be true to your own identity before you even start to put it out there for everybody else to understand. Teresa, Lenin, anything else you want to add to that question? You know, colorism versus racism, similarities, differences, the confusion and impact of that?
I agree with what Alex said, because growing up, it's funny that, you know, my grandmother, she would hate when I would get very dark in the summer. I get dark. I would tan. I love it to this day. I love it. And, you know, she would say, muchacha, no te ponga tan negra. And I never knew what that meant as a child. But growing up, I understood. And it's crazy because my aunts all look Afro-Latina. And, you know, my grandfather was very dark. So when she would say things like that, my aunts would be like, don't say anything like that to her. You know, she's beautiful no matter what color skin she has. And, you know, with colorism, it's basically what happens when people discriminate against their own skin tone, not just their race. And it happens amongst people of the same ethnic or racial group. And in the Latino community, it's one of those taboo topics because it's uncomfortable for many to recognize their own biases and prejudices within their own culture. And, you know, the impact that it's had in the Black and Latino community, this mindset has to change, and it has to change within the home setting, you know, especially with children, because children, you know, it's learned behavior. They mirror what their parents say and hear. And now, you know, the media, programming, and the biggest influencer, social media, you know, it's the foundation where biases and discrimination and prejudices begin. And that's what needs to change. You have to be accepting of who you are.
Yeah. Lenin, next question for you, if you'll give me a second. You know, misinformation and biases and role models and all this kind of stuff. It's just so dramatically accelerated in the presence of social media. It's so dramatically accelerated in the presence of mass media. And you look at the past year with all the political and social unrest, and it's just been front and center, and everybody's got a say in what's happening. And so I do want to, poke a little bit on that. And, Lenin, have your thoughts on race, color, identity evolved, especially over the past year, given all the political and social unrest we saw, the disparities in death rates and treatment of COVID, the election, the ongoing violence in the Black community, all as a result of police, with the police state, all those things, how does it change your view? Were you more cautious? Where do you maybe lean forward a little bit more, et cetera?
So with the advent of technology, I feel like social media, especially Instagram, Facebook, Reddit, every time I'm going through these platforms, I get kind of irate with what I see, like when I see a video of a 13-year-old, I was watching this, I think last night, getting chokehold by a cop, because of a mistaken identity, because he's Black, is like, what's going on? I feel like technology is a double-edged sword, right? Because now with the tech, it's so much faster to get the information out to everybody. So you could see everything live and direct when it's happening, not like during the civil rights movement where you saw things on TV, but you really didn't feel it, like, as you could feel it now. Like I feel like now with technology is so much more in your face, and a lot of things that happened last year, like I went to a lot of the marches in Manhattan for George Floyd and all that, because of social media. So I feel like social media has brought a good platform to gather people, to make more sense and more awareness of what's happening. But this has been happening for ages, and it's sad to see how we're still in this predicament. Like we're still in this bubble, which we still haven't broken out of. And it's something that I really wish deep down that, like, in the future, this bubble bursts. But it's hard to see that bubble bursting, especially with what we saw, like you said, the election, and how divisive or divisive the country went with all that, So it just amazes me how tech has evolved and has made so much awareness with so many different topics, especially like racism and social injustice and all that. But that's pretty much my 2 cents.
Yeah, and the sad part is the bubble that burst, from my perspective, is actually the trust in the media, because now you never know whether what you're seeing is the full story. You don't know whether it's the perception of fairness and it's really not fairness. And one of the things I started doing last year is I was going on Snapchat and using the Snap Map to see videos directly from the locations where stuff was happening. So I was seeing unedited, people on the ground activities, because I never knew whether I was seeing a biased cut on this channel, that channel, et cetera, in between. And it's just really, it's disheartening, and it makes me want to check out. Before we move on, Alex, Teresa, I want to just give you a chance. Have you any evolution, your thoughts on race, on color, on identity as a result of this the past year, and everything we've gone through in the country?
Yeah, and I don't think it's not only me. I think most Puerto Ricans have even, looked at this, because, to be honest, what has happened in the last couple of years is an increase of racist rhetoric that I've never seen before in my life, honestly. And in the direct attacks on us as individuals and as a race. Also, not only it creates a hostile environment, which is what has been seen more and more, but also, from a more holistic point of view, when you are restricting the opportunities of an entire island, of an entire country, when you diminish the contribution of those. And I'm sure that a lot of us rethink the way we want to be related because of what's happening. Because again, to Lenin's point, all of this might have been happening for a long time. Sure, it's been happening for a long time, but the exposure is incredible. But it's not only exposure, it's exposure and increase in the actual rhetoric. So in Puerto Rico, in the wake of the protests for Black Lives Matter, they painted the streets, and they also took the streets to create the awareness. And at the beginning, I remember thinking, well, what does that have to do with it? And then I thought more of it, and I said, like, well, it's in reality, going back to colorism, this is happening not only because of who they think you are, it's because they look at you and they make assumptions based on the color of your skin. So now, when we felt safe because, oh, we're citizens, no problem, we just go there, get a car, we get a house, no problem. Then we're saying, well, that could happen to us too. And I don't think that level of fear had planted in our minds so radically as now. So for sure, not only has it impacted the way we think about ourselves, people think of us, but also even in the way we want to relate to this reality. As I said earlier, due to the relationship we have with the U.S. So it's completely changed the minds of a lot of people.
Teresa, any thoughts about our question?
Sure. This was an interesting question because, social media, like, Lenin mentioned, it's a powerful source. And the things that you see and witness, it gets you very upset. And, we also have to be conscious of maintaining our mental health during these times as well. But honestly, the nation has made racism okay, especially our former administration. They made it abundantly clear, formally acceptable to have racist views and beliefs. And it led me to lose some faith in our country and our system. But I've always had a voice, but now I have an even louder voice within myself to know that I have to fight differently. And I know it means now I know what it means even more to come together, like as a nation, as a people, to enlighten those who have not had a voice or do not know how to use their voice. And what is crazy is that it's made all of us, feel okay to speak up differently and collectively in a way where we don't have to stay silent any longer. We can use our voice to speak up and say, you know what, I don't agree with any of this. Because for me growing up, I didn't have to go through a lot of this. I was friends with everyone. And the majority of the friends that I was friends with in grammar school were Black and Latino. And we all got along and we embraced one another. It wasn't a skin color thing or what's your last name and you have an accent. We embraced each other. And that's what it's about, embracing each other's differences and learning from that.
Yeah, I completely agree. We're going to move on to the next segment of the conversation, but I do want to remind the audience that we are accepting questions via the questions tab. So if you have anything you want to ask us, and I want to just put out one comment that was made. It wasn't a question. It was really just one of our attendees said, "I'm just amazed at the openness of this session. I'm so thankful you're addressing this topic at a personal level." And that was one of the things that I promised. We're going to have an authentic conversation, right? The masks are coming off. We're going to talk about what it is, because if you don't talk about it accurately, then you're not going to get to a place of betterness. And so I want to thank that person for that comment, and again, I encourage everyone in the audience to take advantage of the questions tab that's available to you. So you identify as Afro-Latino, and we talked about how it impacts your life, but this is the latinXfactor, sharpen your professional edge. And so let's talk a little bit about how it impacts your professional career. And for each of you, what has been your experience being Afro-Latino in the profession? Let's start with Teresa. Let's go ahead and start with you first.
Okay, so as a female, as a Latina, Afro-Latina, Taino Latina, as a woman of color, these gender-based challenges are often compounded with obstacles of racism, making it even harder to navigate our way to the top. And it's something that my father would always tell my sister and I growing up, you have to work hard, if not harder, because of who you are. And I feel like we have to do a better job of having a louder voice and coming together consistently to make progress in order to see these changes occur. There was a recent research put out recently, just this week, from Nielsen, where Afro-Latinos make up nearly 5% of 40 million Black households. And the research broke it down and showed that 22% are from Dominican Republic, 32% are from Puerto Rico, 18% co-identify as Mexican American, and 29% other Latino, excuse me. Those numbers are amazing. And, you know, Afro-Latinos suffer injustices both due to the color of their skin and anti-immigrant bigotry. Afro-Latinos need to be included in this fight for equality and are almost slightly forgotten, and they're part of the culture. And there aren't enough conversations, I feel, to bring light the struggles and challenges of the Afro-Latino and, you know, what they faced in the workplace and beyond. So I think these conversations need to be had, and if you have to get uncomfortable, get uncomfortable. That's what we're here for, but also be able to welcome that constructive feedback.
Well said. Lenin, Afro-Latino in the profession. What's your experience been into that?
Well, for speaking, you know, on a personal level, for me, being a Afro-Latino or even Latino, Hispanic at the United States Patent and Trademark Office was a blessing to find SHPE, to be honest, because I was part of SHPE in college, and I went to Virginia. I moved out there. Not first time I moved out of New York City. I'm a New York City through and through. Went to Virginia. I'm in Virginia at work, and somebody tells me, "Oh, we have a SHPE chapter here," and I'm like, "What?" And through that, I kind of found my second familia out in Virginia, and I feel like being Latino, Afro-Latino, kind of helped me, you know, pretty much people see me and they're like, "Oh, you're Latino." So they came to me instead of me going to them. So that's how I found SHPE. It came to me. So I think that was my experience as in the workspace. My job is very, very different from a lot of jobs where I really don't interact with coworkers much. So I really don't have any personal experience with being an Afro-Latino and like interacting with other people in that sense.
Yeah.
But I could say that being Afro-Latino or Latino did bring me SHPE to me at work. So that was awesome.
Teresa, Alex.
So cool to hear Lenin say that, because I was thinking about something similar, because, you know, in when I started my career in 1999, I was already fully involved in SHPE, and I had gained, which I'm thankful forever, I gained my confidence, how to interview, how to present myself. But also, I think I want to highlight the importance that corporate America needs to takes on this role as well, because when I started my career in General Electric, back then I was quickly invited to be part of the Hispanic Forum, which is their own organization of support of Hispanics, where you get to meet other people, and then they introduce you to other Hispanics who've been very successful, and you get to talk to them, and then all of a sudden you feel supported and included as part of a larger organization. And that's very important, because that's the base of your career. You starting your career, if you have that from the very beginning, you have this sense, hey, I'm one-to-one with this guy here, wherever he's from. You can start from the very beginning shining on your own, because you're already past that. You're not afraid. You don't feel like you're less than anybody. So these forums, these organizations that are built within the corporations, the big corporations especially, are really important. When I came back to Puerto Rico after that experience, my relationship, the way I presented myself, the way I projected, and I challenged my coworkers outside of Puerto Rico, is something that I did not see in many other colleagues, because that base was not necessarily there. My experience in general is that SHPE and these organizations internally within the corporate America, if they allow you to be part of it from the beginning and not being segregated or being excluded from the local communities, that builds you a strong foundation to be successful for the rest, of your career.
Teresa, anything you want to add to that one?
I didn't hear you, I'm sorry.
Anything you want to add about what's been your experience?
Well, as far as my experience, it's the reason why I joined a lot of these organizations, because I felt like, okay, I belong here and they have the same values and same ideas and same beliefs that I do, especially Prospanica. Like when I joined Prospanica, I was like, oh, wow, this is a Hispanic organization. They do a lot of great things. And we, when I was president of the New York chapter last year, we set the bar very high and we pulled through, and we have very challenging, difficult conversations, especially during our civic engagement series, which has never been done before. And we brought to light a lot of these particular issues. And now with leaders of color, it's a mixed group of us. And I love the fact that we listen to each other, we hear each other, we engage in difficult conversations, we cry, we laugh. And it was like, like what you had said, it's like a little familia, like Lenin said. And they embrace you. The good, the bad, they embrace you as who you are. And I think that's so important, that we just, a little bit of kindness goes such a long way. It's easy to be angry and to hate, but it's very hard for people to be kind. And that's all it is. Be kind to one another. And you would be surprised how far, because you just don't know what people are going through and what they've experienced throughout their life.
Yeah, so seeing off that point, and I think one of the questions we got was recently, we all observe, but we all will never live in each other's shoes. And so one of the things that these conversations are really good for is to create awareness of some of the challenges that individuals face that maybe others don't see. That we all have blind spots, right? And so what the question came in was, what are some challenges that you've personally faced because you were Afro-Latino that maybe others didn't realize you were dealing with, or you've seen other Afro-Latino coworkers deal with, and you're like, oh, I know what that is because I've had that too. Because we want to make sure we're educating not just ourselves, but educating the whole group about what are some things that each of us bring to the table that we may not see or being brought to the table as a challenge. That's taking up processing power, that's distracting us from being our full, authentic, fully productive self. And I'll open up to whoever wants to jump in on that one first. Or I will call it something. Alex, let's start with you. And, any unique challenges that you think especially are relevant for an Afro-Latino in profession?
Yeah, I think Afro-Latinos get the whole combo because you get the prejudice that's tied to just being Hispanic in the U.S. And then on top of that, for having your skin dark. So the visual cues become an obstacle for you, and all of those with a brown tone. And deep inside, we kind of know this. And I want to circle back to something Teresa said earlier about these funny jokes that our grandmas tell us that porque eres negro te pasa eso, or y tu abuela dónde está, or making fun within my uncles. They make fun to each other to find out who's darker and who's whiter, and they sound like jokes, but then in your mind, and it has happened to me, when you do sense some weird interaction with another colleague, you ask your question to yourself, and you're like, is it because I'm Hispanic? Is it because he's looking at me for my skin? You have all that in the back, and when you see something not going well, you start to try to figure it out if that's what's happening. So that's a challenge. It's a mental challenge that happens. And I'm gonna add a third one that it's even more for Afro-Latinos in Puerto Rico. Most people don't know that we are citizens. So we get there and they just think we're immigrants, and they ask you for your green card, and you know they ask you what was the process and all of that. So you got like the triple combo of prejudice and challenges with people, and I guess, you know, on top of languages and all others. But I think back to my point, I think Afro Latinos get kind of the full combo of challenges when it comes to prejudice in their workplace.
But I want to give a little time for looking forward, but just very quickly, Teresa, Lenin, anything else you want to add on the unique challenges faced by that community? You guys are good?
I think he was spot on. The only thing I can say with regard to that is that you always feel this sense of imposter syndrome. Am I good enough? Will I be good enough? You start to doubt yourself, which is a terrible feeling. And, you know, some people, you know, you struggle with it today more now, probably now more than ever. You know, is it my name? Is it the way I dress? Is it the way I look? You know, and that's something that, you know, people are very visual, and, you know, they can judge you based on that. And it's funny because in my Leaders of Color cohort, one night we all wore hoop earrings, and I was like, can you imagine if I wore these to work, the things that these individuals would say? But if my counterpart wore it to work, it would be fine. So I've experienced that.
So let's talk a little bit about looking forward, because I think we spent enough time beating the horse of history and bias, but how do we get to a better place? And as an LGBTQ individual myself, the answer to me has always been allyship. We can all always be an ally to another person. And so when I ask all three of you, know, what does it mean for you to be an ally to another community from which you don't belong? And is there one thing you've done personally to step up to the plate so that you are not just tolerant, not just patient, not just a spectator, but an ally? You're actually got some skin in the game. Let's start with Teresa. Let's go and start with you.
Sure. For me, allyship is not just saying, yes, I'm an ally, I stand beside you, or I post on social media every hour on the hour about what's going on out there in the world. It's actually taking action, show support to the unrepresentative communities. Yes, it can be hard to determine which action to take or how to engage in these often sensitive discussions, but I just want people to know it's okay. It's okay to ask questions if you don't know. And too often, individuals have a fear of saying the wrong thing or taking space away from someone else, but amplify your voice. I think we owe it to one another to listen and engage in these challenging topics, you know, but also, like I said earlier, remain receptive to constructive feedback. And for me personally, I participate in a lot of these discussions. They're open, honest discussions with my ERG groups at work, with our diversity and inclusion groups within NYU. They hold seminars and workshops, and I participate. I chime in. I don't hold back. You know, provide feedback and ideas. Like, be a part of a nonprofit, volunteer your time. You know, I hold events with Prospanica and the other organizations, and we have these open discussions surrounding these topics and then some. And, you know, that's one way to show your support. Brainstorm on different ways to engage a broader audience. You know, don't just say I'm your ally, do something as well.
Alex, yeah, allyship, and you know, what are some things you do to be a better ally to others?
The fondest memory of satisfaction that I've gotten is, as I said earlier, I had the privilege of creating and managing the co-op program for the pharmaceutical company that I worked at. Before that, I was an active ally to the local chapters here in Puerto Rico as part of the professional on my end. But when I had the opportunity to give, you know, upcoming professionals, engineers, the ability to be in an environment, have their own projects, present in front of you know, larger audiences, being a general manager, a CEO, a co-worker, it felt great to sense their appreciation for navigating through the the stress that comes when you're getting your first job. So there are many ways to contribute. That was my way of helping out, and myself learning too, because when you help someone be better and succeed, and I probably manage over 50 to 60 students through the program. Each one of them kind of like lights you up too. You get you feel better, you feel fulfilled. So I think that's one great way of getting involved.
Lenin, allyship.
So to me, allyship is like a fruit salad, right? We're all in there. Instead of a melting pot, we're a fruit salad where you could taste each individual fruit, and we're helping each other to become that fruit salad, right? So I take allyship pretty to the heart because I like to stand up for what's good. Like I went over the summer, they did a little rally for Dominicans and Haitians hand in hand because Dominicans and Haiti don't see eye to eye, and that was very powerful. When George Floyd and all these civil unrest was happening in my backyard, I blasted Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream just so the community could like hear it. And then somebody called the cops on me and said that I had a gun, and it went south. But the cops knew that that's pretty much racism. Somebody pretty much called the cops because they don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear people coming together and partner and ally with the community that's being beaten, that's being social injustice and all this stuff. And it's like, to me, I feel like I take that to heart, and I always want to see the better of people, right? Like always want to give everybody the benefit of the doubt, whether you're black, brown, white, Asian. Like to me, allyship is just like a nice little fruit salad that we're all eating and enjoying.
I've heard so many different references to the fruit salad. I've heard it called a caldo. I've heard it called a stew. I will freely admit, one time I was during an Asian American event, and they used sushi as an example instead of the caldo. So it was just like, it's always something funny for the audience. So actually, you guys touched on something that one of our attendees also wanted to ask about, and I want to pull on Julia's question. She said, we've all been in situations where somebody does something that's just not cool. It's not okay. And how do you approach trying to educate those folks in a way that calls out accountability, but also provides an environment or opportunity for them to learn? Because we all know that you can tell someone what you think, and they may not listen, and in fact, they may fight back. So how do you make a learning experience when you see something that's not cool? Hold them accountable, but also to make it a teaching moment. If you can make it a teaching moment. Anyone can go on that one.
So I have a recent, I was in the Dominican Republic last week, and I was at the beach with my family, and I have my mother and my cousin. They're like, you think those are Haitians or are they dark Dominicans? And I'm like, what does it matter? Like I told them, like, why does it matter whether they're Haitian or dark Dominican? They're human. They're minding their own business. What does it matter? Oh no, and I'm like, no, you gotta like have an open mind. Like, don't be so gun ho on like, oh, this person is dark. Oh, he must be this or must be that. It's like, you can't be that way. You have to like give people the benefit of the doubt. So I had like that little conversation with my cousin and my mom, and it's like, that was like literally last week.
You can also point out, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. You can also point out to that individual how it would make you feel, or spin it where you put them in that position and say, okay, I don't agree with something that you just said. Now I'm going to look at it from this lens. What if it was you and you were in this situation? How would you feel? How would that make you feel? Educate them, because I feel like no matter where you go, you're going to meet various people in different walks of life, and you're not always going to agree with something that they're going to say. And they can say something that can be quite offensive. Educate them. As hard as simple, I mean, or hard as that may seem, educate them. Tell them the reason why this can be offensive, or tell them the reason why, you know what, we need to change that mindset. 2020 was a year of change. It was a year of 2020 vision, looking at things from a different lens. We all went into last year with a different lens, not knowing what was going to happen. And we have to change everybody's mindset. And there will be times where difficult conversations are going to be had. You have to be comfortable in your own skin to be able to have them. Give them resources if they don't know what to do, how to handle it. Provide them with certain tools, because some people sadly don't know. And it's a terrible feeling. But you know, the struggle for fundamental social and economic justice in this country, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done, unfortunately.
Yeah. I want to, if I may, I want to add another angle to this as well, and I completely agree with what you both said, is that we also have to be, in a way, careful to not be judgmental. And I'm just saying that because there are people who say it with purpose, and there are people who say it out of ignorance, or just they just didn't even mean it. And that doesn't make it less, you know, offensive. But on the other hand, we can push someone to the other extreme if we become preachy and agitated with this. So we have to, in a way, do the exercise of teaching and educate it, but in a way that we don't push them away, because we took it in a way that they didn't mean it, and we just have to tell you know, it's not that you're a horrible person, it's that, you know, this is how it sounds. Just, you know, keep it in mind. So it's something, because I mean, it have to be careful of just polarizing, which is some of the things that we've seen also.
I've heard the phrase a lot lately, assume positive intent. And the thing about that is, you should assume positive intent, but you also should not smooth over when something hurts. So I don't think you meant it this way, but it still hurts, and I want you to know it hurts. You have to, it's not the first half, it's the total package you got to talk to. But that opens the door for a conversation. And so we're coming close up on time, but I want to close with just one other quick question through the chat, the Q&A panel. And I think it's a great way to end today's session, is we all talked about some of the things that we do to be allies. What's one thing you would recommend to those listening today and those that are going to watch this on YouTube as it's recorded and offered on demand in the future, that they can do, one individual commitment they can make to be a better ally, especially in situations where perhaps they don't have the power, they don't have the privilege, but they're still seeing things that are not cool? Alex, I'll start off with you on that one. One thing people can do.
I think one of the things that I think has helped me as well, and other people, is that you have to help people speak up, help other people speaking up, because if we're in a room, many of us can feel intimidated by, you know, the audience, and if you can spot and help someone be more, you know, confident about speaking up in an environment, that I think eliminates the first barrier, which is language, which is just communicating, and then that person can show their abilities and they can contribute. So it's I think one great way of helping others is helping them and giving them the tools to speak up and be unafraid of speaking their mind and ask questions. That'll get them far.
Yeah, that's similar to what I was going to say. I was going to say, you know, ask questions, and, you know, it's all in your approach. And, you know, perfect example, one of our D&I webinars that we had at my job, this woman broke down into tears because I felt so stupid, she said, because I don't know what to say or what to ask. And the chief diversity officer said, it's okay, ask the questions. If you want to know what organizations to turn to, here we have a list. You can participate, you can learn, attend some of these webinars, attend some of these events, attend an event like this, and share your thoughts, share your ideas in a very respectful manner, because some people they get stuck because they're afraid. And we all have to overcome that fear of, I don't want to ask because I don't want to say something wrong. Okay, but then we can rephrase that and try to guide you and help you to open your mind and say, okay, let's put it into this lens, and then you can have open discussions. I think it's just a matter of tapping into those resources, looking information up, because there's a plethora of information out there, especially on the internet, and different organizations that you can turn to learn. So those are some thoughts.
Lenin.
So I'll add to that with just one quote from Lauryn Hill, which is, miscommunication leads to complications. So I'll leave it like that, because I feel like communication is so key with regards to bringing somebody in to allyship, or if there is anything that you see, communicate and communicate well. So
yeah, that's what started it to begin with, was miscommunication. Almost every time. So with that, I'd like to thank Alex, Teresa, and Lenin for being on our panel today as we celebrate Black History Month. We have a couple of quick announcements. Again, reminder that the session is being recorded. It will be made available via YouTube on the latinXfactor channel. And so we're so appreciative of Prospanica joining with SHPE to make this session happen. And if you want to connect with Teresa, you want to connect with Lenin, you want to connect with Alexander, you want to connect with myself, those are our LinkedIn addresses. But also we have 2 more sessions coming up in the diversity inclusion series in the month of March, as we get ready to close Black History Month and we get ready to start Women's History Month. And so celebrating Latinas in engineering, and engineering meets the law of women and intellectual property. And so with that, thank you for joining us this evening. Thank you for spending time with us, asking your questions, being attentive. And just remember that progress is made one step at a time, and equity is also made better one person at a time. Thank you again for attending. Have a blessed evening. Be safe. Take care. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.